Today's original intro was destroyed by a British youth with a distinctive scar for, quote, being endowed with the partial soul of an evil lord. As a replacement, I will now tell you, in a plain and normal manner, that this is the media podcast Backlog Brain Rot, with its three hosts Straw Hat,
Konnichiwa.
Parrott,
Hello, hello.
and me, Connor. I wrote that because I saw that Hogwarts Legacy was on your list, Straw, and then right before you started, you took it off. So that will be relevant next month.
That's okay because I did just come back from Harry Potter World, so I've been around a lot of British youths lately, so
How was it?
it was fun. Now, I did start getting sick, so we were there like 2 days. The second day, I started getting a sore throat that morning, but I wasn't sick enough where I didn't enjoy the amusement park at least. So, but yeah, definitely the Harry Potter stuff is the best stuff of Universal Studios Orlando, because a lot of the other franchises they have, I'm just like, does this really deserve a part in the theme
Yeah.
park? Like, you guys are really reaching for stuff. Like, they have a section called Toon World, but it's like all these
that's a
old
classic,
comics. Yeah. I mean, it's nice, but it's like I was thinking like a lot of these are like not the main tunes you'd think about, but they just work with what they have. So
Yeah, it's from that era where you had to pull a mascot from anywhere and everywhere.
I've only been there one time, and I remember my friend and I, it was like a friend's trip, and him and I just sat in the Simpsons land for like 3 hours straight for some reason.
that's funny because we hung out in Dr. Seuss World a lot just because they had this giant tent with food and it was away from people. It's mostly the kids area, so it's not as crowded because Hogsmeade is insane, of
Yep.
course, because everybody's there to see Harry Potter stuff. And I will say the best ride was probably the one where everybody gets sick on and they remove the 3D glasses from it. But I think it's the
Nice.
Forbidden Journey, Harry Potter one.
I don't think I've ever been on that. When I went, well, I've only been to Universal 2 times, and the last time was over a decade ago or so, or a little less, probably like 8 years ago. And I think the only Harry Potter ride I went on was like maybe like robbing the vault or something. I'm not sure which
Oh
one
yeah,
that is.
Gringotts, or what is it, Grimgets or something? I can't remember the name now. So
Gringotts?
Gringotts, that's it.
Do they still have that roller coaster where you get to pick the music that plays in the background while you're riding it?
I'm not sure if they. I don't remember that we didn't get to ride. What is it? There was one that we didn't ride because it always had like a 2 hours wait time, and then Hagrid's bike roller coaster shut down the second day. So
Whoops.
those two we didn't get to ride, but the Transformers ride was also cool, and the Spider-Man one, which it's so weird to have like Marvel stuff there, because it's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't Disney own you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the Universal owns the theme park rights to most of the Marvel characters in Florida or something very specific like that. So that's why they're all still over there.
Yeah. Incredible legal maze.
They are gonna get Nintendo at some point, I guess. I heard 5 days after we were there, which I'm like, oh, it would have been nice to wait to go to when Nintendo World's gonna be there, but who knows how long that'll take. So
I think I saw last that it was not going to be there until like 2025 or so.
all right, so yeah, we're good.
It just opened in California, I believe.
Yeah.
Right, yep.
This whole theme park thing was always been lost on me. I never even went to Disneyland until I was already a teenager, and by then I still couldn't quite figure out the appeal of it.
See, I love going. My girlfriend's really into Disney World, so we've been together for almost 7 years now, and we've been probably like 4 times.
There was a lot of people still, though. I wasn't expecting so many people to be there, but it was packed.
Yeah, I don't really think there's ever a dead time for those sorts of places.
Yeah, maybe Christmas Day or
Well,
something, but
they actually say that's one of the craziest days to go to Disney World.
oh wow.
It's like wall to wall people.
Well, glad you guys had fun. Getting into it though, let's go ahead and talk about what games we've played this last month. So, Parrott, let's start with you.
Hold on one second. I thought you were gonna start with him. I want to swap. I want to do my Zelda game after him.
All right. So we want to start with Straw Hat.
Yeah. because I think his is going to be entertaining. I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about mine.
All right, so as a few of you knew or know, I started to play Link to the Past because I've never played it before, and I was really enjoying it. It was a great time, but as you guys know, when you play games using save states, there is a risk involved in that, and
Oh,
that
yes.
you sometimes can erase your save state and make so you pretty much lose all your progress. And that is pretty much what happened to
Oh
me.
no.
So I was in the Dark World after beating the wizard, and Zelda had been captured. So pretty much halfway through the game, and then that happened. So I'm like, well, I guess I really don't want to play or start over again. And of course, since I hadn't been saving traditionally, I didn't have any progress. So that was the tragic end of my Link to the Past playthrough. But I was really enjoying it from what I played. And I can definitely tell it was a really great game. But yeah, sadly, I suffered the save state problem with that.
Did you lose your save state, or did you accidentally save over like the main menu or something?
Yeah, I like reset my save state and messed it
Ugh.
up.
That is, yeah. I always am so scared of doing that I actually still always save manually in the game too, just to be safe.
Yeah, I typically do, but on Steam Deck there's hotkeys. So, but the bad thing is they share the same one of the same keys. So if you're not thinking, because you do, I think it's right, right. Is it the right trigger or just the right button, and then the select button to save it, and then left trigger and or the select button to load it. So you can easily get those mixed up, and that's what happened. I got in a save state where I just couldn't progress, or I just messed up my progress. So
Yeah, I had quite a bit of save state wrestling while I was doing Fire Emblem through the emulators. And one thing I realized about halfway through is that when you have dumping save stating, which dumping the memory into a file and then reloading that, and then you alternatively have the actual save file system, I realized you could get the game into some pretty weird states if you uh, don't time your save states right either in certain games.
yeah, so as Parrott said, definitely save your game also, and not just relying on save states, so you do not have a tragic Link to the Past playthrough such as I.
So, do you think you'll ever go back to it after this horrible incident happened?
Oh, I'm sure I'll go back. I just don't know how soon because I kind of wanted to just play through some of the Zeldas, so I'll probably just keep going. Which I have a lot of the 3D ones next, which I think Ocarina of Time will be the next Zelda I'll play, and then Majora's Mask, and then maybe even Wind Waker. So the next 2D one might be the Minish Cap that
I
I
love that
play.
one.
So
Yeah. Hopefully, you can get back to it one day and you can actually save for real.
yep, I'm surprised how long the game was. That's because I was
Yeah.
like 6 or 7 hours in, and I'm like, I figured this was like a 10-hour game, but it's like no, it's like 15.
That's really long for an old game.
That's about how long a lot of them are. It's kind of like the range. Because that segues into my first game I want to talk about. And I played Zelda Oracle of Ages on my 3DS, emulating the Game Boy Color game. And that one also took me around 15, 16, 17 hours. Uh, I would say it was very, very similar to Oracle of Seasons, which makes sense because they both came out at the same time and they're, a pair. There are two games in a pair. And actually, you can take, you take your memory. Well, it's actually a password because the game is so old, and you import the password you get for beating the one game. So in my case, I beat Seasons first, and then you import that into Ages, and then the game plays out slightly differently, and then there's an extra endings like section of the game that you play for
Yeah.
playing both of them.
I feel like I made a joke already about passwords being the original SD cards, but you really can encode quite a bit of information into a random string of letters.
Yeah, it is pretty impressive because it seems to remember some of the stuff you did, but apparently, like the old version, you could use a link cable and it would pass over even more stuff like items and things.
Yeah, you can store a series of flags in a string, well, a word or whatever in layman's speak, And so the whatever you're typing in as the password is actually like a bunch of conditions of I did this, you did that, you had this amount of stuff. It's really neat. Some nerd notes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you how this Zelda compares to the rest, but I know you're gonna be doing a special episode on your favorite Zeldas, so I won't ask you about
Yep,
that.
yep. Sean and I are going to be doing one. So hopefully, should be next month sometime. So I'm trying to dig into the Zelda games I haven't played that I think will come up. So now I've finished Oracle of Seasons and Ages. I would say that I probably liked Ages a little bit more because it was more puzzle. I would say that Ages had more puzzles in it compared to Seasons, which was a little bit more about the combat most of the time. I had similar complaints about Ages that I had with Seasons though. The hub world is a bit obtuse at times, so I definitely had to consult a guide for quite a few different situations to figure out where I was supposed to go, which is so weird because you'd think that you'd get lost in the dungeons, but that never happened to me the whole game. It was really just where do I go next to get to the next one where I would have difficulties. And the difference in this one is I remember talking about it in the last episode that the seasons you had the rod that you could change between the four seasons, but this game had a harp that you could go back in time. So there was two maps, a past map and a current map. And I feel like that mechanic was just a little bit more interesting than the season stuff. But overall, I thought they were both really, pretty solid Zelda games. They wouldn't be in my, top five or anything, but they were worth playing.
Nice. I actually did some retro emulator gaming as well last month, and I inspired by Fire Emblem Engage, which we have a nice long episode on now. I went back and played Path of Radiance and Fate's Birthright. Path of Radiance being one that I had never played before and was in that big section of games I missed. And it might already be my favorite Fire Emblem game, which,
Ooh.
yeah, mostly for the story and just the overall flow of it. Gameplay wise, it definitely feels a little more classic, not quite as uh bare or like what's a good word? Not quite as undeveloped as I expected. Uh, since since Awakening, they've just been adding systems after systems to see what sticks. So I expected Path of Radiance to feel pretty bare bones in comparison, but a lot of the core stuff is still there at that point in the series. I've realized, so that was pretty nice. Uh, the bigger surprise gameplay wise was how many weird side objectives there were, and most of them were hidden.
Yeah.
Did you get into any of those when you played through Straw?
Yeah, I played it last year. I don't if I did I didn't really seek those out. If I did, if it was by accident because I tried not to like look up a guide, even though this was the classic Fire Emblem problem where if you don't bring the right characters in to recruit some units, then you're just screwed because there's no like warning or anything, but that's a classic Fire Emblem trope. But yeah, I also played this last year, and it definitely is one of the best ones. And I guess we are in for a treat, Connor, because everyone that I've heard of that's played Radiant Dawn says it's better than Path of Radiance, which is the direct sequel to Path of Radiance.
Except Varsity. Varsity said he didn't like it.
That's interesting because everybody else I've heard likes it more. So
Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. But what my experience with Path of Radiance was, I was going along, no guides. Yeah, I know there's a lot of pitfalls you can fall into, but I felt like I generally knew what to expect in terms of the patterns. Don't over
yeah,
rely on pre-promoted units. Make sure you're
hmm
getting your experience distribution good. Make sure you're getting at least one character of each class pretty well up there. Doing all that, then I got to about mission 10 or 11. And that's when it finally gives you, no, it was like a little earlier than that, maybe like 8 or 9. It finally gives you the full results screen then, because now finally Ike is in charge of stuff. And I saw the thing for bonus experience, and then I realized that bonus experience was experience you could freely allocate to anyone in the party, and you could get a lot of it. and you could
Yep.
get like 5 or more level ups after a mission with bonus experience. So I had to
Yep.
know, how do I get bonus experience?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I don't think they've ever done that in any other Fire Emblem game before. Maybe they do that in Radiant Dawn too, but it did take me by surprise, and I had forgot about till you just brought it up. But yeah, that is what I would try to use that too.
Yeah, they do it in Radiant Dawn, according to my friend who had Radiant Dawn as his first Fire Emblem game. But what that ended up doing to the game is I still ignored all of like the guides for how to level stuff because I was determined to do, make those decisions on my own. But it became Fire Emblem Golf between the bonus objectives, which almost always included a beat an X number of turns, and the save states. So I was actually finishing missions in somewhere between 5 to 10 turns, depending on how long the mission was. But I was still spending like an hour or two per mission trying to get the perfect strategy to get all the side objectives I could. One of which is a stealth mission where you kill no one and have to not get spotted.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I don't think I did that. I think just would kill people. I got to ask you about the final boss. It's not really I mean, it is a spoiler, but it's not as well because it's a typical Fire Emblem thing. But I remember when I defeated the final boss, or I thought I did, and then he revived, and you basically have all your units sitting there, and I'm like, I'm so screwed. Like, I'm in so much trouble because you don't have the rewind mechanic, obviously, in later Fire Emblem games. And I was playing on hard, which was pretty difficult in Path of Radiance. So,
Yeah, I had already sent Ike over to the boss solo, and that was one of the most annoying final bosses of the entire series for me.
yep.
Not a fan. That was
Yeah,
like
it
the
was
one stain on the entire game for me.
because you couldn't do much damage. You just had to hope you get a crit.
Pretty
Was pretty
much.
much.
And Ike was
Yeah.
maxed. Like,
Yep.
couldn't grind my way past that. I did also play on hard, so that didn't help.
But yes, Path of Radiance, great game.
Yeah, it's a Fire Emblem Golf, the game. I was beautiful and I was insane. But I'll go ahead and give Parrot a break from continued Fire Emblem speak before I say anything
For
about
now.
Fates. So let's get to you were playing Backbone. Is that a game or was it the that
Uh-huh.
PlayStation thing?
Yeah, so I discovered I'm just like going rogue against the visual novel club this year. Like I'm just like I'm gonna play visual novels that aren't in the club apparently. But so Backbone is a game I got in a humble bundle, and it was on my Steam list. I'm like, well, I'm gonna check this out. I really didn't know anything about it, but it's like some noir, like animal, hard boiled detective story, like visual novel. It's really short. It's only like 3 hours, but it's like pixel art, and it's actually pretty cool. Like it was fun to play. There are choices you can make, but I looked up after I got the ending, and it's like, oh, all the ending's the same no matter what you do, which always is kind of disappointing. But for really cheap, I'd check it out because it is interesting, and it's actually pretty dark. Like it's
Oh,
like darker than Zootopia for reference for you
I.
animal fans, but
How does it compare to Red Ball?
oh, it's not that dark.
What is
don't know
that?
anything about either of those series. Well, I know it's a little bit of Red Ball.
I've never heard of that before. What is it?
Isn't
Oh,
that where
really?
like those rabbits like they basically get tortured underground?
I don't think that's the main thing about it,
Oh, did you say
but
Oh,
Redwall?
Red Ball, the
Oh,
classic
okay. Yeah, no,
fantasy
I read one of those as a
story.
kid. I remember like obsessively loving that.
Yeah, but I just looked up Backbone, and that is pretty distinctive style. I think I have been seeing this on Steam for a while, so good to hear. Might check that out eventually.
It looks pretty interesting. Yeah, I like the way that it looks. I like the art style on it. And 3 hours. That's my cup of tea right there.
yeah, that was definitely the best part. Was it was very relaxing to play, and the characters were funny too. So
Nice. All right, Parrot. You got into Dead Space Remake and Callisto Protocol?
Yeah, so I rented Dead Space Remake. I had GameFly for a couple months, but now I don't have it anymore. But I used that opportunity to play Dead Space Remake, which I would have got to eventually, but I definitely wouldn't have played it right around launch. But I hadn't played Dead Space since I remember I had it on 360 back in high school, and then I played the PS3 port of it in college. Then I haven't played it since, so it's been quite a long time. So the game, like the mechanics of the game were, I still remembered them, but the game itself was not fresh in my mind at all. So it was almost like playing a new game, like a brand new game.
Yeah.
And I would definitely say that the game, it really holds up over the years. I think it has a wonderful horror atmosphere. I wouldn't personally really think I didn't really think the game was like that scary. I don't know. I'm not that easily scared, so that could be part of it. But
I can imagine as a prolific fan of horror that it takes a little bit more to get you on your
yeah,
edge.
yeah,
Let me stop you right there, Parrot. As a fan of not horror, I did play the original and it is scary. It's
yeah.
creepy. That's why I'm like, I can't play this anymore. It's too freaky.
Yeah, so I definitely didn't feel like that. I think it does have really, really great visuals. I mean, it's a beautiful game, and the atmosphere around it is really, really good, for sure. You definitely have like that sense of like isolation because you're pretty much alone the whole game, just wandering around this space station fighting all these monsters.
I'm really interested in checking that out since I've finally butted into the survival horror genre after I played Resident Evil 4 for the first time a couple years ago. But
Yeah, a lot of people would say this game is like the best survival horror game ever. I don't personally agree. I think it is very, very, very good, and it'd probably be on like my top 10 or 5. But I don't, I don't hold it in that high of a regard.
yeah, the laser cutting mechanics and the limb
Oh,
dissection that's very appealing to me, especially
it's
considering the way I played Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that is honestly the best part about it. Like you get a lot of different guns, and some I like more than others. But I don't really think any gun is as good as just the basic plasma cutter to just like shred off the limbs to stop them from coming at you.
And this is in the remake they gave the main character a voice, right?
Yeah, that is one of those things that I didn't remember that he didn't have one before. It had been so long, so it didn't feel that weird to me. But then you go back and look at videos of the old game, and I'm like, oh yeah, he never did talk, did he?
I feel like with a game like that, that's probably a pretty good decision.
Yeah, I would say so. You get to know, the characters around him more. I mean, I don't, the plot is the plot is good. It's totally fine. I don't really feel like that's the appeal to the game in my opinion, but
Hmm.
it's serviceable and I know it has a lot of fans. And I do remember Dead Space 2 also being really good, so I'd be curious if they're actually going to remake that one also.
Uh, I would wager a bet with how successful, or at least with how much notoriety this remake has gotten.
Yeah, I hope they do. I remember liking 2 a lot.
I remember everyone saying, "Oh, Dead Space 2 is just like this is the peak of the series" back in the day.
Yeah, then they did Dead Space 3 and it was supposed to be really terrible. I've never tried that one.
Yeah, everybody makes the joke that they're just like Valve. They stop at 2. Dead Space 3 doesn't actually exist. So,
It'd probably be better. My only real complaint in Dead Space Remake, well, there were a few times I would get frustrated where I feel like the game tries to be survival horror and tries to not give you a lot of ammo, but it can be kind of frustrating because then it also throws like dozens of enemies at you at all times. So you end up like finding credits in the environment, but you don't ever really buy too many upgrades for yourself because you have to constantly buy ammo. So I feel like that's my only real nitpicky complaint. But otherwise, I do think it's a really amazing game, especially the parts where you're in low gravity and you get to fly around while also fighting. Really, really cool.
Yeah, that kind of ammo and money economy stuff is always a struggle in games like Fate's Birthright, which was one I was playing, or just Fire Emblem in general, where it's used to
it's
have too much money.
it's funny, Connor, because you pretty much covered a spectrum of Fire Emblem rankings for fans here because you played one of the most beloved Fire Emblems in Path of Radiance, one of the most hated Fire Emblems in Birthright. So,
Yes, and then there's Engage, which just kind of sits in the upper end. But yeah, Birthright was not as bad. as had been led to believe. Uh, kept hearing it was the brain dead sibling of Conquest, but that wasn't quite true.
Ooh,
Uh,
brain dead, huh? Maybe that's the one for me.
if you play on normal, it might be a little more brain dead, but it actually was pretty difficult at times, just not in the kind of complex way that either uh, Path of Radiance Golf was or Conquest is. As I also started playing Conquest, but I've decided that's where I'm going to put a break in it for now and come back to it later, because Mission 11, it turns out, of Conquest is one of the most difficult in
Oh,
the
yep.
series.
I still have heart.
And
I had pain as soon as you said chapter 11 because I was
yeah,
like, oh, that mission is so hard. Isn't that the one where you have to defend the dock?
you have to defend the dock for 11 turns,
Ugh,
which
Oh,
is a long time in that game.
heartaches. Now I will say, I liked Birthright more than Revelation. Revelation's the one that I like the least because it's just like a mess of storytelling, and they try to like tie both casts together, and it just makes you have way too many party members, and the story is weird. So
I heard there's also a DLC where you have like 50 units on your side against a mega army or whatever.
oh boy.
Yeah, unfortunately, doing the emulated version, I don't have access to any of that DLC. So I have to play the game just as, plain vanilla. I'll keep my thoughts short on Birthright. That it was more interesting than I expected, but the tuning is all over the place and the story delivery is not particularly great. I do, however, love a lot of the stylistic choices.
Mm,
They having that feudal Japan theme for the units was a fun shakeup, and then all the weapons are likewise changed.
yep.
And then I also did like that they tried to make a bunch of interesting weapon choices instead of just the linear progression of, you know, iron, steel, silver. Uh, but again, the numbers at the end of the day ended up being so wacko that I couldn't even really reason about anything other than a few of the mainline ones. So yeah, lots of interesting ideas that didn't quite all gel together. Still fun though.
I'm gonna go back. I want to play Fates again at some point. I was just gonna only play Conquest because that's my favorite version, but I could check out Birthright again. I don't think. How long is it? Is it 30 hours?
Mm. I guess it depends on how fast you're going. I think I spent about 30, 40 hours on it.
Okay,
And the first 6 chapters are shared between them all. So
right. Yeah, we'll see once. I definitely like Conquest more, I remember, but I could go back and try it at some point. But it definitely was not my favorite at the time.
no, better than led to expected, but definitely not my favorite. So you both played a game called Toe, we believe it's
Tome.
called.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but this was I think I got this in the same bundle that I got Backbone for Humble Bundle. So, but yeah, I was looking at this game and I'm like, this looks like just a fun, chill, relaxing time. And pretty much the gameplay is it's in a nice black and white aesthetic, and you walk around and you're just taking pictures of things. You're doing it for missions. Your ultimate goal is to go to this mountain peak and take a picture at the end, but along the way, you have to like earn stamps by getting different pictures for different people along the way to qualify for bus passes so
Huh.
that you can continue on your journey. But it's very relaxing, low stress game. So I know Parrott, he checked it out too.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was a little iffy on it at first, but once you kind of get into the groove of the just wandering around, the maps are like pretty big. It's probably like,
Yeah.
10 screens each in, different directions. You kind of just wander the map, talking to people, finding the different missions, and kind of like take in your surroundings. And then you go around looking for items, taking pictures, And then also there's like a mechanic where you can take pictures of all the different animals and all the different levels to finish your photo catalog, which is also, a nice like completionist kind of like itch that it scratches.
Sounds neat.
Yeah, I did really enjoy it. And it was not very long either, which, that's apparently my style nowadays. Like, I love these 3 to 4 hour, like,
Yeah,
relaxing kind of games, and that's definitely what this was.
yeah, and some of the missions are pretty funny too. Like you have to. I remember the city was one had some of the craziest missions I remember because you had to like one of the missions was you'd go on like this date with this ghost, but you could only
Yeah.
see some ghosts if you would wear certain glasses. Then you had to take her to these various parts around the city. Or there's like this family of balloons. The child gets lost in the snowy mountains, so you have to go find him even because it's his birthday. So
Yeah.
Huh.
Or remember, we had to help the grandma get her car or whatever. And then
yeah.
later on, you have to take a picture of her out in the street. Did you get 100% in the game or no?
Oh no, I didn't go for 100%. That it probably would have got a little tedious, but if I would have did that. But some of the later maps are really there's a lot of stuff to do. But yeah, I did. I think the first area I did pretty much 100%. But other than that, I pretty much just went along and did missions as I felt like it till the end.
Yeah, I did end up doing all of it because I got to the end and I had done like 75% of it. So I just looked up a guide for a little bit of help and then I went through and did all the rest of it to get the 100%. And I also messed with the DLC, which was actually really interesting because you go to this tropical island, and it's a pretty big map. It's a little bigger than the biggest one in the base game, so that alone took me like 2 hours. But there's also a pretty cool mechanic where the map is different in the day and the night, so you have to go to sleep in certain spots so you can wander around and
Uh,
see. So the level's almost double, and like because you're on an island, when you go to sleep, the water lowers because of the tide, so you can get to places you can't when it's daylight. And yeah, so it was a really interesting. It was definitely a nice, relaxing game. I played in like probably like 3 sittings.
yep.
My only point of reference on this is Pokemon Snap, and it sounds like a more complex version of that.
Yeah, it's not on rails, so
It's a combination like photo game, but also kind of a lot of a puzzle game in a way, trying to
Interesting.
figure out how to get to different spots or how to solve the puzzle to finish the
Yeah,
mission and get whatever to appear that you need to take a photo of.
photo adventure.
Yep.
it's definitely a good in between game for the big releases.
All right. I think the only other major game I had to talk about that I completed this last month, actually just a few days ago, was Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. And that's one that I got way back in the day on Steam that my dad just kind of randomly bought it because it was on sale. And this is in early Steam where we're just like, oh, it's this thing we had to get for Half Life and all these other Valve games. Oh, it's got this other stuff on here. Let's check it out. And I was not very familiar with the immersive sim genre of games that kind of derived out of Looking Glass Studios works back in the day. So it was a very novel sort of experience for me. So Dark Messiah of Might and Magic has almost no gameplay connection to any of the other games in that series, which do either of you actually know Might and Magic as an IP?
No, I've never
I
heard of this before.
I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so it's a classic, I think, turn based strategy game. And it's an old Ubisoft IP, or Ubisoft, however European you are to say it. And I'm not entirely sure where the logic came from, but they went from making all the strategy games and then they gave Arcane the rights to make a first person action RPG in the setting that gets pretty more into the darker aspects of it, I guess, as you I mean it's called Dark Messiah and there's a lot of demons and not so uh, friendly things happening. But It's janky. Sometimes it's really smooth, and a lot of times you might be teleporting into the ground a little bit, or enemies will be hitting you before their animations actually start. But despite all of that, it's actually a pretty charming game and not overly long. Uh, I would start with a Dishonored or a Bioshock or any of the other more well known immersive sim games, but Dark Messiah is pretty good if you like those sorts.
So it's turn-based strategy, you said, or what
The
kind of?
the main series, Might and Magic,
Oh,
is
okay.
this is the weird like redhead stepchild of the series, which was already kind of fading out of popularity at this point, I think. But yeah, this is first person action RPG.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm not sure if I do or don't like that genre because I've played some that you mentioned that I liked, like Bioshock, and then I've played others that I didn't really like the Prey reboot that they did. So I'm not really sure how where I stand on that.
Yeah, this one's closer to Dishonored than either of those.
Yeah, and Dishonored, I had a kind of a mixed reaction to. So I guess I'm all over the place on those.
Yeah, that seems to be a lot of people. Like in the Discord, we'll talk about those games every once in a while. It seems like each time Arcane releases a game, it appeals to a different group of people entirely. Some people will be super hot on Prey and super cold on Dishonored, and then they'll switch up, or they'll be lukewarm on all of Arcane stuff, but they love Deus Ex or
Yeah,
Bioshock or something like that.
Yeah, Dishonored should have been for me because I do love stealth games, but I think just like the way their games feel, I just think that must just be it. I just don't like it. Whenever I try one, I don't enjoy it.
I played Dishonored as well, and it just didn't feel right to me either. So I only played it for a little bit, and I'm just like, eh.
Yeah, if Dishonored doesn't feel right to you, this game will feel even more wrong. And that's coming from someone who says that I think Dishonored's one of the best feeling like first person games I've played. I love the way that game plays out. So yeah, it's a very luck of the draw with with those Arcane games.
Gotcha.
All right, Straw Hat, you have anything else you wanted to mention?
All right, yeah, so my next, I continue my journey through Sonic the Hedgehog I played Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which I played in like 2 sittings or something like
Yep.
that. And not really too much to say other than I liked it a lot more than Sonic 1. It just feels a lot better. I like how most of the worlds are 2 zones instead of 3 now, so you
Yep.
get more variety. And also the mini games for the Chaos Emeralds are a lot better too. I
Which
feel
one
like
is it in that one? What is the mini game in that one?
that's where you have to get a certain amount of rings at a checkpoint.
Oh, right, and you're like running down the ramps.
Yeah.
And you go
Where the
left and
first
right.
one it's just like a pinball where you just bounce
Yeah,
around trying to find the emeralds.
it sucks in that one. I think the one in Sonic 3 is the best. You'll get to that soon.
Or those like pseudo 3D mini games where you're going around the?
Yes. Yep.
I did
Yes.
not like those.
The one in 3 is like you run around and you have to grab the blue circles without touching any of the red circles. And then yeah, the 2 is like half pipes, pretty much.
I would prefer a half pipe.
I definitely see the improvement in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 over 1, so I would recommend. They just learned so much more from that game, I feel like.
And Tails gets added, right?
Yep, Tails is following you the whole time.
Always dying. He just
Yes.
dies behind you all the time.
Yeah, he was very annoying in those bonus levels because he would always get hit by the spikes and lose my rings. I'm like, stop it.
He also does like in the water
Why?
section, he just doesn't get his own bubbles and drowns all the time.
Yeah.
Why is it like that? And it's multiplayer too. Technically, you can plug in a second controller and control Tails. But
Poor
why?
Tails.
It doesn't follow him. So what
Eh.
always happens, even in Sonic Adventure, you try controlling Tails, he flies off a ledge because he can't see where you're going, and Sonic moves, and everything is wild.
I guess that's just part of the Tails experience.
So the
Tails
next,
canon, no true perspective of his own.
just a lemming. The next game that I will shout out that I played this month is Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. This is the second game in the Shantae series. I'm not sure if either of you have played any of these. This is the second one I've played. So this is actually, I think, the third game in the series itself.
I have a friend who really likes those, but that's the most closest I've gotten to it.
I did play Pirate's Curse last year, actually, so
I really enjoyed this one. The only one I played before this was Half Genie Curse, which is more level based than Metroidvania. So I didn't really realize that this is what the series was like generally, because I think all the other games are more like this one than that.
yep.
But it's definitely a more simple Metroidvania. It has its confusing moments, I think, where it's a bit obtuse in the overworld. Like you need certain items to get to certain spots, but sometimes it can be a little confusing. But overall, when you get to the dungeons, those are more like pure Metroidvania when you're running around trying to find the keys to progress. And all the dungeons are pretty manageable. Like they're, maybe take like 30 minutes each, 30, 40 minutes, because the game overall is not very long. But it was a satisfying Metroidvania platforming experience. Kind of a little bit, I don't know, it's almost more platformer than Metroidvania, I would say. Also has a really, really fun cast of characters.
I didn't even realize there were dungeons or any sort of overworld in those games. I thought they were pretty straight through platformers.
So Half Genie's Curse, the fourth game, the first one I played, is like that for the most part. But yeah, these ones are a little bit more overworld puzzles and then some dungeons inside. In dungeons, it's still like a Metroidvania. It's just,
Yeah,
jumping and then whipping your hair at people for the most part. Then you can unlock different abilities to, do different things.
that does sound fairly interesting.
Yeah, I would recommend. I like this one probably a little more. I like this one more than Half Genie Hero, but there are elements of this that I didn't like quite as much. So I'd say
Hmm,
both of them are solid, and I want to try to get to the fifth one soon.
very nice. Last game I have to talk about, which is really only a little bit, but mostly because I know you finished it, I think, Parrot? Hi Fi Rush?
Yep,
Yeah, so I just started this a couple days ago, and I'm already entirely in love with it.
yep.
It's fabulous.
It has a really, really charming visual style to it, and I'm really a sucker for music games in general. And so I really always like these kind of music, kind of combat mashup games a lot.
Yeah, I really enjoy rhythm games, but I'm not super big on brawlers, which is why I first saw it, I wasn't entirely sure it was going to be something I would care about. But the rhythm aspect feels so nice, and it kind of, for me, it makes brawlers fun because I don't typically care for like I've been trying to play Bayonetta and
Yeah,
a few of those other sort of, what do they call them, spectacle fighters, right?
something like that.
I have a hard time getting into the groove on those, and this one's literally about being in the groove, and
Yep.
that feedback loop of hitting buttons at the right timing was like the perfect thing to finally get me to go, ah, yes, now I get it.
Yeah, the I just love the musical element, and the environment really showcases the music element too. There's so many things like moving in time to the beat of the song that you're supposed to be fighting to.
Yes, one of the most energetic games I've played, just period. And like you said, the art style is gorgeous.
It actually has some pretty really interesting characters and story that that develop as the game goes on, which I didn't quite expect just from looking at it. I'm glad you are enjoying the beginning because I found myself kind of struggling, not struggling, but I didn't really love it right away. It took me a few levels to actually really get into it. So if you like it this much now, then you're probably really, really going to like it as you keep going because it adds
Yeah.
so much more movement mechanics, which make the combat feel much better.
Yeah, I just got the counter in
Yep.
track 3 or at the end of track 3, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I feel like once you get the counter and the ability to grapple to the enemies, that's where I really started liking it a lot.
Yeah. So, looking forward to finishing that this month.
It is on my wish list.
Definitely worth it.
All right. And my last game I have to talk about is NBA Street Volume 2, which Parrott and I and RCT did an episode on our top
Oh,
5 arcade sports games, and this
Rainick,
was my
Rainick.
number
Rainick.
one. Or Rainick, sorry, not RCT. Who's in my head, I guess.
We're always thinking about him.
I guess
RCT
so.
living rent free.
Yep. But anyway, yeah, this was my number one game. So I'm like, well, I had some time. I'm gonna try and play through the campaign again, which takes like 10 to 12 hours, by the way.
Wow,
Wow.
I did not expect that.
What?
Yeah, because basically you create this basketball player from scratch, and you have to go through the streets, and you just win these matches to get points. But I ended up maxing out my skill for stealing, so I could just like steal the ball easily. But you can end up basically the game is pretty difficult until you can beat Stretch's team. He's like 6'11", and he just like can easily slam it on everybody. So,
I wonder how. Uh,
but yeah, it definitely I still really like to play it. It's still really fun. I wish they would make games like this still, but it's so arcadey and just chaotic, which is great.
yeah, that really shows the difference between you and me in terms of sports games. As you said, you maxed your character's stealing stat, and I did not think about basketball. I just thought, oh, cool. So there's a part of the game where you can wander around streets and take people's money.
That is funny. Yeah, because usually you basically want to make the tallest player you can, and then just you can because you can basically goaltend in this game. But I'm like, no, I'm gonna try and go a different route, and it worked. So
I kind of want to bust this out and try the campaign. I never played the campaign in this game before, but I just know that if I do that, I'm gonna get really addicted to it. And then next month, I'll only have one game that I wrote down.
Yeah, I played NBA Street Volume 2
For
for 80 hours plus.
yeah, I can see myself doing that. That was me when I like played Mutant Football League. So maybe I don't need that for myself right now.
The closest I've gotten to that was in Madden 2005, I think. I played around with the career mode and made this tiny little short dude who could really chuck a Hail Mary. But I think everyone could in those games, or maybe that was 07.
Yeah, I can get pretty addicted to a good sports campaign. I don't know why. It's just something in my brain. It just clicks. I'm like, all right, I'm
yeah,
gonna do this. I have this game on my iPad that's called Retro Bowl, and it's just like the old Tecmo Bowl games, and it's just like crack to me. I don't know. I've played like 23 seasons of it.
oh
It's just like
man,
every few days I pick it up and I play it for like 20 minutes, and it's just been like that for like almost a year at this point.
Well, that sounds like a healthier addiction than sitting down and 8 hours have been sunk into playing golf in a tactics game.
So for me, I'll kind of like quickly go through the rest of my games because, like I've said, I pretty much just play short games at this point. That's where my mind's at. So, I played Castlevania 3 and 4 on the in on the anniversary collection. 3 kind of mad, didn't really like it that much. I found it more frustrating than anything. That was one of the NES games. So I was like not really sure how many more Castlevania games I would play, but then I played 4, which Straw Hat played last month, and that game was just so much better.
yeah, that's good. Because I never really I tried the NES games before, and I'm just like, eh. But Super Nintendo games I've just always liked more for some reason, like
Yeah,
how they feel.
it's so much less stiff, and you can like use the whip and diagonal
Yeah,
and up and down. It is so much more freeing, which therefore makes the game a lot more fun. And I didn't have to just abuse the save states constantly to actually progress. Like I felt like it was hard, and I did have to use the save states. I'm not gonna lie, but it was a more manageable game compared to those old games where I was like pretty much save stating like constantly. And if I got hit once, it was like basically over for me, and I'd have to reload.
yeah.
That was something I realized playing Ys 3, the Super Nintendo version, and then comparing it to Castlevania Symphony of Night a few weeks later as the PlayStation edition or whatever, I
Yeah.
don't remember. Uh, yeah, there's a certain point with those old platformers, especially action platformers, where they're just janky.
Yep.
They just, they're not smooth or well made. Some of them just aren't.
Well, speaking of janky platformers, I've also played this little indie game called Frogun, which is a PS1 style platformer. I think it came out last year, where you play as this girl with a talking frog gun, and the gun just shoots out its long frog tongue, and then you use that to like grapple to enemies and kill them, or grapple to objects to do the platforming. It is
Oh, yes.
pretty interesting game, but it's pretty frustrating because the controls are a little too much like its PS1 inspiration. And there could be times where I was just like going insane trying to just do the simplest tasks with the frog gun.
Reminds me of when I tried to play a game called Tenchu, like, or
Oh,
something like that, the assassin game for the PS1.
yep.
Oh boy, those were some controls.
Yep.
And I also played another Metroidvania, Gato Roboto, which was very, very fun. Is very short, is only a few hours long, and you play as a small cat who's dropped off, and definitely just a parody of Metroid. Like you're dropped off of the ship at the top of the alien planet, and then the human can't go because he's hurt, so he sends his cat, and then the cat obviously doesn't talk, but you wander around as the cat, and if you are the cat, you get hit once and you die, but you very early on find the mech suit. So you play most of the game in the mech suit, so you can shoot missiles and jump around, double jump. Then you can turn into a submarine. So
The indie method of, hey, I want to make a Metroid game, but I don't want to get sued. Therefore, this.
yeah, it's just pretty much Metroid with a cat. I really enjoyed that one. I would recommend it if you like that sort of game, and it's not overly long, so it doesn't ever get to that point where I sometimes struggle with Metroidvanias where you're kind of running around aimlessly because the map never gets too big. It's pretty much one big map, but it's very clear where you have to go at all times.
Like the end of Hollow Knight.
I have to try that. I have to give that game another fair shake. That's one of those games I booted up once and I played for like 5 minutes and I was like, I don't want to play this, and then I haven't gone back.
So good.
Hollow Knight is
I'm sure
really,
it is.
really good. But once you get to the last 5%, you're just saying that going, oh, please don't make me backtrack on this map again, trying to figure out where to go.
Then one other indie game I played was Alba, a wildlife adventure. It just was in a PlayStation sale, I believe, and it just looked really cute. So I just decided to give it a whirl, and it's just a very chill game where you play as this little girl on an island, and on the island there's a wildlife reserve that is being shut down by the big bad government, of course. So
Of
she
course.
is trying to run around, take photos of animals, clean up the island, and try to convince the government to not shut down her beloved wildlife reserve. Very, cute game. I guess I'm into these photo games lately. I played two of
Yeah.
them in 1 month. This one's a little more open. It's just kind of a big, not big. It's just an open world where you wander around looking for animals, take photos. Very, very, very chill game.
Interesting.
And my last two, just quickly, I finished Unit 13 on Vita, which I just a third person shooter that I've been literally playing for like 3 years. I'd play a few missions, and then like 6 months would go by, and then I'd come back and play a few more. So I just happened to finish it this month. And then shout out to Radic. He told me to play Murasaki Baby, a weird, weird puzzle game on Vita that I would not say I liked, but it did look like a Tim Burton style game. But pretty much you just control this weird, freaky looking baby, and you use a lot of touchpad and back touchpad controls to help her get along. And I played it. That's about what I can say about it.
Interesting.
That sounds like a indie Vita game for sure.
A launch Vita game for sure, because it had
Yeah.
all
For
those things
sure.
that never, launch games. It's like they just
Yeah.
throw everything in there, but then none of that stuff ever gets used ever later.
Yeah, features that no one wanted to use anymore after the launch games.
Yep. Though, Radic would kill me if I didn't at least say that it's better than your beloved game, Frobisher says.
Frobisher says.
What are these names?
Oh, it's like this really bad WarioWare clone that
Pretty
Radic,
much.
that Straw Hat told us to play.
Yeah, it was a free launch game with Vita or something. I remember playing it, and Radic has it associated with me now. So
Yeah, so you gotta get pinged about it every week.
yeah,
I never had a Vita. That's
Oh,
a section of gaming that
sorry,
I've
Radic.
I've only experienced via ports to the PlayStation 4.
I love my Vita. I really do.
I would have loved it, I think.
Every few months I dust it off and play a few games. Then then it goes forgotten for a few more months until the cycle repeats.
until about 2020, I at least once a year I'd have a moment where I'd sit and go, "Ooh, I think now's the time I finally get a Vita," and then I give up on it again because there's just no point.
Next time, I'll convince you. I have 3.
Wow. All right. I guess that's about it for games then this week.
Yep.
So, can go ahead and get into movies and TV. I'll go ahead and just say that I didn't really watch anything of note, just continuing on with Last of Us. So, this will be mostly you guys.
You got are you not going to do multiplayer minute, Connor? Or
I'm saving it for a good moment.
all right,
Okay.
sorry.
Saving it. It's sitting there in the background. I got my timing. It's like a wizard. Never late, nor is it early. The multiplayer minute arrives precisely when it is needed.
You want to re-tee up Straw Hat then, so we know where we are.
All right, so you want me to start with my movies and TVs?
Go ahead.
All right, so I got a few things here. First of all, I think I mentioned this last time too, but my wife and I have been watching. We just finished it now. A reality show called Snowflake Mountain,
You did
which
mention
is
it.
about these random people that like they're like just out of college or still in college, but their kids living with their parents, and they're pretty much just completely useless. Like they barely can get up in the morning themselves. They can't put their dishes away. I remember one of the guys is like, I could clean up and do this stuff, but I just choose not to do it. So we're like, well, this should be interesting. And so basically, these people get taken to these really fancy camping resort, which it's like they act, of course, like it's the end of the world because it's camping outside, but it's like the nicest camp ever,
Yeah.
and would be
Yeah.
super expensive. But and then they have to do these basic tasks that they think is so difficult, and ends up being super easy. But it was enjoyable. I'm curious if they'll do a second season. Some of the people that get taken on there are just hilarious. They're just like pathetic.
I
But
do want to look this up. I gotta make a note to look this up. Maybe I'll watch it too.
So, this is a reality TV series?
yeah, it's only 8 episodes the first season. These two like army vets take these, I don't know if there's 10 snowflakes out to the mountains and be like, we're going to teach you about responsibility and how to live as an adult. And so yeah, if you like camping or seeing people fail badly at that, then this is pretty good. But they actually, it's like they're very dramatic with stuff, but a lot of the stuff is super easy that they can do. So
It's a little. I've known a few people like that. It's ugh.
but yeah, it was a fun watch, and I'm curious if they do a season 2. I'll definitely we'll watch it for sure. And then I got to give my anime shout out for the month, which will be Welcome to Demon School Arumacon, and it's on the 3rd season already. And so I've been watching that, and it's from the creators of Gintama, like the anime studio. So
Oh,
which
really?
yeah, so I already knew I was gonna like this, but you would think it's gonna be a slice of life, or almost like an isekai actually, because he's basically a human that gets his parents don't care about him, and they just decide to sell him for money to a demon who wants a grandchild. So he takes him to school, and he just basically has to, and he's like a super powerful demon principal of the school, and he takes him there, and he has to attend school there, and it's just hilarious. Like you would think it'd be pretty generic and boring, but the humor is top notch. The writing, the characters are great too. It's hard to explain how good it is without watching it, but definitely check it out if you're interested in more comedy type anime.
That was one that I have seen and considered many times, but the splash, I'm very visual with what I get to. So the splash image just wasn't doing it for me with his goofy smile. I was just like, nah, I don't think this is going to be something I like. But the more I hear about it, the more that's probably, I would like it.
Yeah, because he does look like a very generic character. So, but yeah, definitely check that out. And then another thing I've been watching, my wife is a huge Ted Lasso fan, And since I got a new iPhone, I got Plus or Apple TV for 3 months or whatever. So we decided to watch it because the third season's coming out. And we watched, I think, maybe the first 8 episodes of the season one, and it is really good. Like, I'm really enjoying it so far. It's basically about this college football coach who goes to England to coach soccer, and he has no idea, he doesn't know anything about it at all. So it's pretty funny at what he gets into because or I don't, I guess I'll spoil it a little bit, but the owner basically wants the team to fail because her husband cheated on her and he loves the soccer team. So she's like, I just want this team to burn. So that's why she hires this coach who has no idea what he's talking about. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far.
My girlfriend and I really like that show too. We watched the second season as it airs, and she's very highly anticipating this new one coming out.
That's a show I'm only familiar with because when I was researching, I like getting ready to buy an iPad back in 2021. Their presentation for the new model included a rather long section about the show.
Yeah,
I was
I also feel like
all right, more sports.
you never have to pay for Apple TV. Never.
Just get another Apple device. There you go.
And also, there's always just free offers for like no reason. I just feel like I've had it almost consistently for like years, and I've never paid for it one time.
Because
Nice.
there's really nothing else on it. Like if you look at, I guess there's some new shows coming on it, but otherwise it's pretty bare from what I see, like of
Yeah.
content.
Shout out to Severance though, that's on there, and that's one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Oh, interesting.
We'll have to check that out. And then the last thing I watched, this was a recommendation from Ed and Addie because I had asked. Originally, I got a 4K Blu-ray player, and I'm like, what would be a good movie to watch on that for our first movie, our first 4K movie? And they both recommended Interstellar, which I had never seen before. And we watched that just recently, and we both really liked it. It looks beautiful. I mean, it's in space, so I figured it would look good. And it is a really, really good movie. I had heard how good it was before, but I was skeptical, of course.
I've gone about halfway through that one because my friends and I wanted to watch movies together over online, and they all wanted to watch Interstellar, and I was kind of dreading that because I know it's a good movie to watch in 4K, and we were going to be watching in streamed like 720 1080p off a
Ew.
Plex server. So I was just like, oh, that's not how I want to watch this movie. Thankfully, we didn't finish it because we had to pause for a day. So I get to complete it in 4K eventually.
There you go.
Yeah, you should check it out because it's a really good movie. Definitely one of Nolan's best.
A similar quality. I watched, some more Survivor. Very
You guys
equal,
the reality TV.
equal cinematic quality, I would say.
To Interstellar, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm sure Addie and Ed are both scraping at their faces right now hearing
probably.
I'm sure a lot of people will be scraping at their faces after hearing that. I believe that's the correct response.
Yeah, but Survivor's enjoyable. I don't really have much to say. The new season starts tomorrow after we're recording this. So
Party time.
my goal was to watch season 41 and 42 in between that, and so it gave me like 4 months to do it, and I just barely finished one day early.
Nice.
I'm not a very avid TV watcher when I'm alone, so the only reason that I completed this, finished 42 in time, is that I was on a train this weekend going to New York City. So I had about, between there and back, I had about 3.5 hours of just nothing. So that's where I watched 4 of the 12 episodes. So that's really the only reason I finished in time.
And was that train ride the one where you were going to a play?
Yep. We went to a play for my girlfriend's birthday in New York City on Broadway, and it was called The Play That Goes Wrong, which was a really, really interesting, not what I expected play. I've seen musicals on Broadway before, only a couple, but this was the first like professional play I've ever seen, and it's hard to explain. It is a comedy, but it is the actors are playing actors playing a play badly, essentially.
So like Tropic Thunder.
Yeah. So like the the pamphlet that they give you at a play for on Broadway has the fake pamphlet first for the play that they are supposedly putting on, and then after that they have the real information about the actors. So all the actors are playing characters in this reality where they're putting on this production. So as the title implies, it goes very wrong, like constantly. So like they will be they walk into the set on accident. Like this one guy walks into a pole like 3 times, and then the set starts falling apart around them. They forget their lines. There's this one guy that's so they're also poorly acting on purpose. So there's this one guy that's really, really bad, but he just loves when the crowd applauds him. So he just keeps trying to ham it up so the crowd will interact with him. And there's certain moments where from the crowd you're actually someone's supposed to yell something to them because it all about how no one takes them seriously, and they're really
Yeah.
trying to put on this play, but it just as it says, it always goes wrong.
That sounds great.
it,
I would
it
love to see that.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
it's really entertaining, especially because it's supposed to be serious because it's a murder mystery, but it's like the guy that's supposed to be dead is also a bad actor, so he like moves because people kept so like in the very beginning, like someone steps on his hand, so he like slowly is moving, and then people forget their cues, and yeah, it's really entertaining.
That always reminds me of a comedy writer I used to read back in elementary to middle school called Dave Barry. And he had an entire article he wrote one time about his experience playing a dead body in a play. The surprising difficulty.
Yeah, because you're not supposed to. You probably you got to make it look like you're not breathing. You
You
can't
can't
move.
move.
But yeah, this guy, he definitely moves a lot.
I think that's about it for movies and TV. I'll just throw out Last of Us, still doing pretty good.
Yep.
I really liked episodes 5 and 6. I thought those fleshed out that portion of the story in a way that was very enjoyable.
Yep, I
Um,
agree.
but that's about it. That's all I had. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and continue on to what we read.
Yep. We've been watching Last of Us weekly here, and my girlfriend doesn't know anything about it, so she just calls it her emotional devastation, viewing for the week.
Nice.
Always leaves her in tears.
It's about accurate.
Yep.
I guess we'll keep starting with Straw Hat so I don't confuse Parrot again.
Yeah.
All right, so I have finished reading Eldest, which of course is the sequel to Aragon. As I continue the inheritance cycle, I guess series, not trilogy, because there's 4 books.
It used to be called the trilogy up until there was suddenly a 4th book.
Yeah. And I did like Eldest, but I definitely didn't like it as much as Aragon. I don't know if it's because they switch a lot between perspectives of Aragon and Roran is what they're doing. Like they'll just switch between random chapters, but I definitely liked it more at the end, but Aragon kind of goes through more stuff in this book. And I will say that I did start the 3rd book, and I already like that book a lot more than Eldest so far. So I don't know,
3rd
maybe
book
I
I
just
remember being really good.
yeah, the 3rd one is I think I'm about 30 or 40% through that, and it's might be my favorite. I definitely like Aragon more and then Eldest, but this 3rd book's really good so far too.
I remember in some ways I liked Aragon more, but in other ways I liked Eldest having so much more character development time. Because, with Clanad being my number 1 visual novel, you might have gathered that I have a bit of a little brain rot for the sort of semi-romantic stuff.
Yeah.
So, Eldest gets a lot more into that. And that was pleasing to my young brain.
But yeah, I'm definitely liking the series, so I'll probably finish the 3rd one by the next episode, and might even be on the 4th book by then. So
Very nice. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the rest of them as you remind me what was even in them. It's been so long. And with that, the wizard has arrived, and it is now time for the multiplayer minute. Parrot starting now.
I've been playing Terraria, which is a game I never thought I would like because I don't really like open-ended games that are in the Minecraft style, but I've been playing with my good friends Alexis and Harley, and I've gotten really into it. Mostly, I just like to kill all the bosses while Alexis does all the hard work. And then I also played Apex Legends Team Deathmatch.
All right. I was surprised to see you play Terraria. That was a game that I played at launch, and it kept turning into a massive thing over time. But again, I like that, or like you, I like it much more in Minecraft. As for what I played, my friends are finally playing Dark Tide with me. That's a ton of fun. Super visceral, gorgeous. Makes your computer into a microwave oven for your room, space heater. And then other than that, I'm trying to finally finish Baldur's Gate with a friend of mine, since that's a game that I keep starting and failing after 3 hours over and over and over again my whole life. And the minute's over. That was the multiplayer minute with Backlog Brain Rot. Join us again next week or month,
Beautiful. Maybe Straw Hat will join one time.
maybe.
There's is a chance, actually. You never know.
And all right, with that, I guess we'll get to what Parrot's book.
The first book I'm going to shout out that I read this month was called Wrath by Sharon Molam and Daniel Kraus. This is a book about a company and more specifically a couple scientists that work at this company that are messing with DNA, and they are using that to create a wonderful pets for the home. They've made a fish that glows in the dark, and then a few other things like a tiny horse, and they're decided to branch out and try to find their next big product, which they believe is a pet mouse that is genetically modified to be more cute like a dog, but it has also been genetically modified to be smart enough to type to its owners with a keyboard and then speak to them. So it's like, oh, you have a pet, then you know exactly what they want. And I'm sure you can imagine that this is going to go perfectly well with nothing bad ever happening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This sounds like a guaranteed perfect seller.
Yep.
Entirely safe.
Nothing goes wrong. Don't worry. Just read it, enjoy a wonderfully happy story.
That actually does sound like a setup I would really enjoy.
It is really interesting. It's a little slow in the beginning because there's a lot of science in it, but
Perfect.
it's also it is also very interesting. It's funny because I've read two books about DNA in the last month, basically. One of them was
Nice.
about changing DNA on humans, and this is a take that I actually found a lot more interesting in what happens to these mice when they become too smart.
Very cool. I didn't read anything this month, but Parrot finally read my book.
I did.
So for my entry for the week, I'll just ask you, what did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of really cool action scenes, and I definitely had a misconstrued what your book was about. So when I got into it, I was like, "Oh, this is nothing like I expected."
Now I have to ask, what were you expecting?
Gotta be honest, I don't know. I saw the cover, I'm like, "Oh, this is some sort of epic fantasy sort of deal," and I would say that is nothing even close to what it was.
Yeah, it's paranormal sci-fi. It gets a lot into my love of cities and sociology, and uh, also monsters trying to rip you apart in dark places.
Yeah, knowing, I'm sure you can guess with my, typical tastes that the monsters part was definitely the part that appealed to me the most.
It was nice to hear that you actually really liked those parts, because that was one of the things where I know action in terms of the visual arts, but it's not something I've tried to approach very often from the just writing
Yeah.
and explaining action. So I was really wanting to make sure that it felt tense and quick and not very uh, the opposite of anime, which is probably
Yeah.
a funny take from a weeb. But I wanted the opposite of that.
You mean you didn't want your conflict chapters to last half your book?
Yeah, I really like action where it's those small details of the fight are the deciding factors, not some big extravagant thing.
Is there a tournament chapter?
Ooh, nope, can't do that.
Maybe in the sequel?
I will say one of the characters is kind of Moe, so there's her.
Yeah,
Ooh.
she's probably my favorite one, actually. Don't ask me to
Yep,
remember names, but
Mia.
yep, that was the one.
Yep. wrote her as kind of just a partner character at first, and then over time she might have become my favorite.
It's also the first time I ever read anything by someone I actually knew, so it was really interesting to read it. I'm like, I definitely can see that Connor wrote this book.
Yeah.
There's like so many parts I'm like, oh, that's a Connor thing, that's a Connor thing.
Yeah, I was curious how much of my way of talking and just thinking came out in it.
Definitely. And even just like the different focuses that are in the book that you wrote are definitely very you. It's like, oh,
Yes.
here's a lot of politic thing and these sorts of things. I'm like, yep, this is Connor.
Yeah. Same time, I didn't want to overwhelm with any one particular interest of mine. So hopefully it was pretty smooth read, other than the fact that, as I've been told, is somewhat disjointed in terms of the story structure.
You know, you can just work on it for the next one if you ever decide to do
Yes.
another.
Yep. Next one would already be a much more focused story since I don't have to do any of the world building.
Yeah, I think that is definitely an element in just storytelling and reading or anything is just, you know, all that world building stuff definitely can make it things flow, you know, in a different way, often like a little too slow, you know,
Yeah.
because you have to set it up for things to happen, you know.
Yeah. That's generally like the barrier of entry for a lot of people with sci-fi and fantasy and the other genre, I don't remember what they call those, but genre fiction or something like that.
Yep.
Is you have to spend time introducing this new world because the rules are different. And some people are not about that,
Yep. I'm about it sometimes. I'm not always about it. It's a more of a once in a while thing for me.
for sure. Well, Straw Hat, now that I'm done shilling, why don't you tell us about Game Over?
All right, so yeah, in between my inheritance cycle reading, I decided to break it up by reading a book called Game Over: How Nintendo Conquered the World. Because I'm a big Nintendo fan, so I always like reading about their history, which is basically what this book was about. So it gets into some of the early Nintendo work in Japan, but it does focus a lot on Nintendo of America, and it is really fascinating the kind of stories you get into. That probably one of the best parts. They get really detailed into how Tetris, was brought over from Russia. So there was
Oh,
a lot of
yeah.
dealings with like other companies that thought they had the rights to Tetris, and then Nintendo went over, and the Russians didn't really understand how video games worked. So they're like, at first they're like, oh, you can only use it on computers where you can plug in a keyboard and a mouse to it. And Nintendo's like, well, ours isn't a computer, it's a video game console, which is funny because earlier when they first launched the Nintendo in America, they named it the Entertainment System, and also, of course, the Famicom in Japan, because they wanted to not be a video game console because they wanted to distance themselves from Atari, because of course they crashed the video game system or industry with some of
Oh, that's what that was all
their
about.
trash. But yeah, it pretty much gets into just the early minds behind Nintendo, especially Nintendo of America, because the son of the president of Nintendo moved to Vancouver with his wife, and then he eventually got or moved to Seattle to start Nintendo of America. So it just deals a lot with that and kind of the early struggles and what they had to deal with. And they also had to deal with being like on top because they were kind of mean to different companies because they had such a monopoly over the industry until Sega and EA and some of those companies kind of teamed up to be like, hey, we can also do this. And then they had to kind of right the ship. But it was definitely an interesting read. It gets very nerdy and techy at times. So I think you guys would like it, especially Connor.
Nice. The Nintendo campus is an interesting place to visit over in Redmond, Washington, mostly because it is entirely encased in Microsoft.
Oh, that is funny.
Yep, you got like a building or two of Nintendo and then an entire neighborhood of Microsoft.
Yeah, because they do talk about Microsoft a little bit in there, but they also do talk about when they were like going to team up with Sony, and then they didn't like that Sony was pretty much going to have control over all the games that were going to be on the Super Nintendo, PlayStation, or whatever it was going to be called. So they stabbed them in the back and went with Phillips. So they get
Ah,
into that kind of stuff.
in the glorious and eternal CDI.
Yep.
What would the
Uh,
world have been like without that?
Ugh.
we wouldn't have had some wonderful memes, that's for sure.
We would be playing Last of Us Part 2 on the Nintendo Switch right now.
Maybe it would have been a good thing.
I think the CDI future is the one we deserve and the one we need.
Yep.
Um, the next book that I wanted to talk about was the newest book by one of my favorite authors, Grady Hendrix, and that is called How to Sell a Haunted House. It is about this woman whose parents pass away under mysterious circumstances. So she goes back to her hometown to, as the title says, try to sell the house. When she discovers that it is indeed haunted, she has to deal with her brother, who she has not got along with in almost her entire life. So it delves into their relationship and, just grief in general, while also
Yeah.
trying to deal with this house that may or may not be haunted. He says it is. She says it isn't, but she's definitely just trying to pretend that it's not.
So is it kind of a drama? Because I could also see that playing out in a pretty
It,
comedic fashion, but
it is more, he is an author that does a little bit of both, I would say. He has a more comedic tone, I would say, but that doesn't take away from the fact that a lot of elements from it are actually serious. But he takes these things and turns them into a more lighthearted spin, generally speaking.
I can dig that.
Yeah, he's an author I really like. I've read all of his books at this point. There's one about people stuck in a haunted like furniture store. There's one about a woman, traveling cross country trying to, reunite with a rock band. So, he's got a lot of different ideas. But I would definitely recommend him because they're pretty light and they're part horror, but they're definitely a little more comedy and
Yeah.
lighthearted and have some good characters in them.
Because that concept sounded like one that could be really entertaining, but could be very boring if it took itself too seriously.
Well, I will say that the big thing with the mother was that she was a lifelong puppeteer, so it's not too serious. Her house is full of finger puppets and hand puppets that she made for her church group, so not too serious.
Fun fact, my mom made some hand puppets for the church group back when I was a kid.
There you go. You could
Relate.
very relatable.
Yeah, that's neat. I'll have to put that one on a list and actually focus on reading one of these months.
Well, you just read enough visual novels to count as
Yeah, that's
books.
true.
This is true. This is true.
All right, and my last book, well, I've read, I guess, 2 volumes of Sakamoto Days, volume 2 and 3, and series is still really good. It's definitely more comedy than serious.
Yep.
Like it is about assassins and people. Like it can get like a little gory at times, but it is just all humor pretty much. Like people are joining his convenience store and then they're just going to amusement parks and trying not to get assassinated, and they're like in this or they went to like this research center now, so it's just a really enjoyable series.
Yeah, I think I want to try to pick that back up when you get closer to where I left off. I probably left off around like volume 8 or 9 or so.
Okay, yeah, I do have volume 4 ready to read here soon, but I'm surprised that there isn't an anime for it yet because I feel like it would be easy to make an anime for it. So
And
Yeah,
considering with a vast volume of animes that they're putting out every month, you'd think so.
I think that will be one that will be fairly popular, wouldn't you think?
oh yeah, definitely. It kind of gives me like Spy Family
Yep.
vibes a bit.
That's
So
I was gonna mention that because I really don't read much manga, but one of the only ones I read is Spy Family every time it comes out, and I knew that was gonna be so popular,
yeah,
years ago because some of them you can just tell, and I think Sakamoto Days might not be as popular as Spy Family, but I think it'll be pretty popular.
for sure.
I'd reason then that it's destined to get an anime soon now that Spy Family is popular and everyone's going to want a piece of that bandwagon.
Yeah, the family like comedy action type
Yep.
thing. But yeah, that's all I've been reading.
Last book that I will shout out is a book that I have about 40 pages left in right now. And that's Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. It is a sequel to a book he wrote last year, My Heart is a Chainsaw, or it might have been 2021. And it's a slasher book, but it's about but the main character is named Jade, and she is a huge slasher fan. So it's a lot about how she has watched all these slasher movies, so she can see that she's in a slasher before anybody else can, but no one believes her. And she just has constantly referencing all these different movies she's seen. So it's a very interesting read. It's a kind of a little bit of unreliable narrator, and just kind of a bit of like all of her thoughts can be jumbled. So sometimes I do think it's a bit hard to understand what's happening at times. But this second one is similar because it's a sequel, but it's a little. I find it to be a little easier to follow. So if that sounds at all
Nice.
interesting, I'd say these are worth checking out. He's also another author that I really like.
It definitely sounds like a series for people like you who've
Yes,
watched and read
yeah.
almost all of the source material.
I think if you have never seen like many slashers, that might be something that's like really confusing to read.
Yeah, that would be pretty out of my ballpark.
Yeah.
Although I get, I'm a Blue Oyster Cult fan. Don't fear the Reaper, baby. All right. Well, uh, that I think will just go ahead and lead into VN Club, which will be a short segment because once again, I was the only one who actually read the assigned reading of the month.
Rip.
Rest in peace. Maybe one day you guys will all get in here.
I can tell you that I will be joining April. I have the game already downloaded and ready to go.
Well, which is that? Because I want to Digimon Survive. Whenever that is, I do
Yeah,
want to play
that's April.
that. So okay.
I believe that's April, yeah. But for this month, the game was Fault Milestone 1, and it was surprisingly better than I expected because it was one that I just saw on Steam one day. I was like, all right, looks kind of pretty. Setup sounds kind of interesting. By the time we put it on the list for VN Club, though, I couldn't even remember what it was about at that point. So that was just kind of a threw it on there and it was short. So imagine that the game that I didn't remember anything about, no one else was like particularly wild about either. Wow.
Yeah, I gotta
But
say, for the first 2 months, we got some really random choices, which might not help.
well, I mean, we had the whole planning session, so
Yeah,
can't fault me for that.
a lot of the ones that I do want to play are coming up later, but I will definitely be playing Digimon.
Yeah, and a lot of that just had to do with people's schedules. So kind of, we kind of just made these in months where people knew they weren't going to be available. It's just like, all
Yeah,
right, Connor's going to shove his in here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it turned out to be more interesting than I expected. What I really didn't expect was that it was a science fantasy type story. Like, he even delves into AI and all that, which was like, okay, this looked like it was just going to be straight fantasy and starts with a bunch of magic. So, yeah, it does have story structure problems where because it was like the part one of what was clearly supposed to be a longer series, and the way it starts, it kind of sets expectations, then shifts gears. And once it's in whatever gear, it's really good. The dialogue's nice, the art is wonderful, the just general points of the story are surprisingly detailed and cohesive. It's just like you start the first third and you think, okay, the story is going to be this. And then you get a third in, and it's just like hard switches to another story, which is good, but it feels like a side story because of how it's set up. So then that plays out, and then it ends. And you're like, great. I feel like we got like half a prologue and a side quest.
and is that the only one?
No,
Oh,
there's two or there's two more I think in the main line, and then there's already like two spin-offs, and those look like they're pretty darn good. So I'm gonna get to those eventually. But yeah, this first one's a funny starting point on its own.
would you say that? Would you say that it's a weirder start than Muv-Luv 1?
It's more normal than that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's it gives you the expectations of what the rest of the story is going to be about. It's just it goes off a little bit into the weeds on this one. Good weeds, but
weeds
the
nonetheless.
weeds.
How long was it?
Oh, 4 to 5 hours at most.
Okay.
Yeah. In any case, for this month, March, the game will be Witch on Holy Night, or Witch on the Holy Night, which I think is what they finally officially localized it to.
What is that one about? I've never heard of that
Yeah,
one
I've
either.
never heard of it. I'm looking it up right now.
So it's a Type Moon visual novel. So it's kind of a contemporary fantasy. If you've seen or played Fate
Oh, yep,
or
yep.
Skihime or any of those, it's the same kind of type of world, it looks like, but it's its own self-contained story. The main character is actually a side character in Skihime, and I really like the kind of like, I think it's like 1980s London sort of setting, and I really jive with Type Moon's art style, so I was looking forward to it.
I don't even see this game on Steam. Is it?
It's on PlayStation and Switch.
Interesting.
Yeah. I know at least one other person in Discord has it, but they're probably going to play it later than I am. So I have a premonition that VN Club for next month is going to be just me again.
A one-man club for now.
Well, April's coming, Connor. April's coming.
April will be our time. Nah, it's good. It's good. I'm having fun here at least. So
All right. Well, I guess we could get into the collectathon club then.
yes, we can.
So this month we played 2 games, and I guess we'll talk about. Well, we played Banjo Kazooie, which we're going to do a full episode on because Banjo Kazooie is one of my favorite games of all time, as well as Parrots.
Yep.
So, and Connor played it for the first time, so we don't want to even hear any of his thoughts until the actual episode because I'm really curious. But we did hear from a few of you about the game, and I was surprised there was a couple of you that weren't loving it as much as I thought you would, but that's okay. I'm curious how it would be to play it for the first time in 2023, I guess, which is what Connor will tell us. But it's probably going to be near the end of the month when we do the episode. And a few of you have already sent me your rankings of the various worlds. So if you haven't already, just message me on the Discord and we are going to rank them near the end of the episode. So look forward to that. And then we also played Super Kiwi 64, at least I did. And Parrot had played it before.
Yep.
But it's a really short, it took like an hour to 100%. And it is a really fun prototype, demo type game. Like it's basically designed in a 64 style game. And you just go around to these various worlds and collect things as a Kiwi. And he has a little backpack and he can stick his beak into different things so you can get higher jumps. But it was a lot of fun. I hope that the studio that made this makes a fuller length game. But did you get a chance to play it, Connor? I know Parrot did.
No, I actually missed it. Although if I had been thinking, I probably could have played it in the background while we were recording this and been
That's
done
true.
by the time we got here.
Yeah, it's very short and sweet. I think it's really smooth to play, and it definitely looks like an N64 game, but I feel like it does control a little,
Yeah,
it controls like what you would remember when controlling, not how it actually
exactly.
controls.
Which,
But yeah, it looks, I feel like they can make a really good, more like 3 to 5 hour game. That would be really nice because this was definitely a really good proof of concept. What's funny is that I did not even know that you could sprint until like the last 5 minutes.
Well, there's one. I don't remember what the collectibles are, but there's one thing in the last world. Like it took
Yep.
me forever to figure out how to get it, and everybody online was saying it too because you get this like turbo upgrade for the last thing you have to get, but it doesn't really explain it. So
Okay, yeah. So that's what it was. So could you not run on any of the levels until then?
right, yeah, it was just
Okay.
that last thing.
That's what I was confused about. I'm like, did I really miss this the entire time? So no, I had to look that up too. I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah,
right
because
now?
I'm like, I can't find because I found everything else myself except that last one.
Same.
I'm just like, and I think that was a common thing. But if you if you think back before you go into the last world, like the pilot guy says something about, "Hey, I'm giving you the turbos for this world," but that's all he says, and it doesn't like tell you any controls or anything. So,
Oh, so it's going for the true 64
Yep.
experience.
oh yeah, there's like very little guidance whatsoever.
Very nice. Very classic.
But yeah, it was great. And this month we will be playing Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, which I know a lot of people aren't exactly thrilled about since we're playing like some masterpiece level games for the club this year. But Parrott really liked it, and I also have it, and I really wanted to check it out. So if
Yeah.
you also want to check it out, I'm sure it'll be a fun time, and I'm sure it's not that long. So
No, it's definitely not masterpiece quality, but it's certainly worth trying. A nice, a different spin on it. And I really like that first one. Second one, not so much, but the first one's pretty fun.
I might get to this one, but most likely I'll end up skipping because I hope to be a little bit on the busier side this month, but we'll see.
yeah, I don't. Maybe I'll be the only one who plays it like Connor, and then we'll both be like, "Oh, so for the club this month, we were the only ones who played these games." Sorry.
Well, I could tell you that I won't play it again, but I played it last year, so I remember it.
Right.
That's close enough.
Yep.
All right. So, about time to wrap up now, and one of these days I'll learn to segue. But let's go ahead and do our shout outs for the month. We'll start with songs again, and I'll start by shouting out not what I wrote down because I realized I had something better. I'm going to shout out the Quantum Redshift soundtrack. That is some choice early 2000s. I don't even remember the name of the genre at this point type of music. Just think typical early 2000s like electronica.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Man,
it's pretty hot.
I've never seen this game before. This looks awesome.
It was dope. You guys had your Mario Kart, and I was over there on my OG Xbox crashing every 30 minutes.
This is like the Xbox version of Wipeout or F-Zero.
Yeah, pretty much. It was a really fun racing game, but boy, did that game crash a lot.
Ooh.
Like everything on the console.
Well, it was their first attempt, so
Oh, I mean, it's an Xbox. They were trying to get the real PC experience. PC
yeah,
level graphics, PC level crashing.
Oh joy.
exactly. All right, my soundtrack or song. We basically just did soundtracks, I guess, this time, but
Guess so.
I wanted to shout out the NBA Street Volume 2 soundtrack because, as Parrot probably knows, like those classic AEA rock and pop songs that they put on
Yep.
the NBA games, it's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Just like I've never heard of these songs outside of the game, really, but they're just so good to like play. And the same like 5 songs play the whole time you play the game,
Of
so
course.
they get stuck in your head.
Like a good old Tony Hawk experience.
Yep. But yeah, great soundtrack. I hope Radic looks it up and listens because he would like some of them, though they're probably way too old for him. So
And I'm gonna shout out the Hi-Fi Rush soundtrack. I don't want to spoil it, but the bass music that plays throughout the game is really good. And then when they sprinkle in those licensed tracks, that really takes it up to the next level.
Yeah, there weren't any like massive ones for me yet, but just overall, like it's given me some great like Tony Hawk classic vibes.
Yep.
Love it. And then for characters, I'm gonna shout out my boy Ike. It turns out he's just as cool, if not cooler, in his game as he is in Smash Bros. So
yeah, he's probably the best Fire Emblem Lord. Actually, I would say.
probably best characterization, great design, a big sword, total bro.
He's hilarious and engaged for no reason, but he is hilarious.
Yes, that kind of blunt, straight man personality, but with just a little bit of his own quirkiness. Very, very, very nice. That's my shout out.
So I wanted to shout out Gruntilda, the main villain from Banjo Kazooie, because she's pretty funny. She rhymes the entire game, which give the
Yeah,
writers credit for that because
because
they
she
get
talks a lot.
yeah, she talks a lot, and It's catchy. Like it doesn't get annoying, but apparently it did get annoying for some people because in 2E they changed that, which some people were really disappointed by. But I just think she's actually a really funny villain because 3D platformers you usually don't even care, but she actually has a personality and stands out because she talks all the time and is always rhyming. So
If you get far enough, she'll even start commenting about how hard it is to continue rhyming,
yep,
which
exactly.
is probably the reason why they stopped in Banjo Tooie.
The
Ran out of
writers are like
material.
enough.
That is a longer game.
I'm gonna shout out another green character, and that is Roddy Tops from Shantae series. She is Shantae's friend, who is actually a green undead zombie who just travels around with her two brothers in this caravan,
Yep.
always threatening to eat people's brains. And she's kind of a friend, kind of a rival, but she's just one of the many pretty fun, lovable characters in that series.
Very nice. And with that, our last thing, we'll just go ahead real quick. What we think we're gonna play this next month. Straw Hat, give us a quick rundown.
All right, so currently my wife and I are playing Hogwarts together. So we're only about 4 hours in. It's going to be a slow playthrough since we're playing it together, but we're really enjoying it so far. It's definitely good if you're a fan of Harry Potter. It's probably making all your wildest dreams come true. And it's also just a really good game to play. And I'm mainly focusing on Like a Dragon Ishin, and I'm about 16 hours in. I've mostly just been doing side stuff like the farm and the battle dungeon missions, but I'm almost done doing that stuff and ready to do what I do in all the Yakuza games and just like mainline the story after that, because otherwise I just forget what's even happening because I'm too busy dancing and planning and making selling eggs and stuff like that. So, and then after that, I guess I'll probably play BioShock Remastered. I've never really played BioShock, and it's been
Uh,
sitting on my backlog. I have all three of them. So I'm like, why not? I could just slowly chip away, play an hour or so a day. And I know they're not that long, but people love BioShock, so I'm sure it'll be
it's pretty
fun to
darn
play
good.
that. Yeah. And then on March 14th, I will start Trails to Azure when it comes out, which is my favorite Trails game so far. I've already played it, but definitely looking forward to that. And if you guys have played Trails from Zero last year, you definitely want to play it. And then I'm also going to be probably playing Radiant Dawn while I play Trails to Azure because I played Path of Radiance while I was playing Trails to Zero last year randomly, and it actually worked really well. So I'm going to do the same thing, and that way we can keep talking about Fire Emblem next month as well. So that is my potential list.
Backlog Brain Rot, a Fire Emblem podcast.
Yeah. Well, on my what I'm hoping to do next month is, I have to be done with Fire Emblem Engage by next month. I have literally 2 missions left, so if I still haven't finished, I don't know what's happened to me. And then I'm gonna play Like a Dragon Ishin, like Straw Hat, and then I'm gonna play this new platformer I got, which I heard is pretty mediocre, but I bought it anyways. Clive and Wrench.
I
Yeah,
heard about that one.
I know. I'm like, it looks so good, but then people are like, oh, it's kind of messy and buggy. I'm like, well, yeah, let me know how it is, and maybe they'll
Yeah,
patch it at least if it gets
I just
better. So,
Sounds like
I'm
what they
always
said about ukulele in a way.
I loved
yeah.
that game too, so I will see what I think about it. Then I just gonna kind of play some old things that have been on my backlog or for a while. Kirby's Return to Dreamland. I'm playing the remake of that, but that is one of the only Kirby games I never played, so that's been on my list a while. Might mess with Professor Layton, play the last Shantae game, more Castlevania, and then my main thing I also really want to try to get to is in preparation for this Zelda episode, I want to finally play Twilight Princess HD.
Nice. Twilight Princess is the only one I've ever finished.
Ooh.
That's one of the only few I haven't. I played a large portion of it years ago, but I'm probably just gonna start over at this point.
Very cool. I'm going to be working on finishing Hi-Fi Rush now that I'm addicted to that gameplay loop. And then after that, Nier will be my action game for the month, and Radiant Dawn will be my RPG/strategy game of the month.
Is this near Replicant or Automata?
Replicants.
Oh, Replicant. Okay.
It probably will end up being Automata as well if I can get to it. But I keep trying to get to both of them, and I keep getting about 3 to 5 hours in, and then I get distracted.
Happens.
Yeah, I really enjoy those, but I know two people especially who really love Nier, so I'm sure they'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, at this point, I won't lie. Getting some Discord cred is a big contributing factor now. But yeah,
You got to earn their love.
yep, that's all for me. That's all I have planned. There will probably be some other weird old game on that list too.
Yep, it's how it goes. Never stays the way you think it's going to be.
Yeah, that's
No.
the beauty of the backlog.
Alrighty. Well, that does it for us today then. Next episode, next main episode will be top 10 Trails in the Sky characters. So be on the lookout for that. This one will actually involve the results of the poll that's been running in the server, which will have already been closed by the time you all hear this. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to solicit for the end?
I think I'm good.
Yep, I'm good. Looking forward to that episode. I'm curious what the list is going to be.
Yes, I think we all are, and we'll all learn who the most degenerate voter is. Uh, and I already know
I
who
have
it
some
is.
guesses.
Addy.
Mm, we'll
We'll
see.
see. We'll see.
We'll see. All right then. Signing off then.
Sayonara.
Bye.
Bye bye.